Thank you everyone. Thank you very much, Lynn, for a great introduction. I'm also here to introduce everybody on the panel. I'd like to start with our first Anne, who's not able to join us because of COVID. Just to read a couple of things about her, she has some of her books available for sale at the back. Just to say that Anne Lambert has been writing and directing for the stage for 35 years. Several of her plays, including The Wall, Parallel Lines, Very Heaven, The Mary Project, and Two Short Women, have been performed in theaters in Canada, the United States, Europe, and Australia. She's been a teacher of English Lit at Dawson College for over 28 years. She makes her home in Montreal, and we're sorry, we miss her. She should be here today too. I'd like to go to my left, to your right, and introduce my fellow speakers. Fellow authors. First, Delvin Chatterson is the internationally acclaimed author of the Dale Hunter thriller series, beginning in 2018 with No Easy Money, an explosive mix of crime and corruption in the computer business in the 1980s. And I think it's Montreal of the 1980s too. Yeah, it's even better. It's very Montreal. As a former entrepreneur, business advisor, cheerleader for enlightened entrepreneurship, Del has written exclusively on business topics for decades and continues to write on entrepreneurship under the pen name Your Uncle Ralph. Originally from the Rocky Mountains of British Columbia, Del has lived and worked for the most of his last 50 years in the fascinating French-Canadian city of Montreal. Yes, that's right. Good.
It's a pleasure to be
Welcome, Del. Good. And last but not least, over to my right here is Michael Kent. Michael Kent is a Montreal-based mystery series author featuring homicide detective Lieutenant Robert Baudry, a tough cop with a snarky sense of humor and a crazy cat. Yes. The action in his 9th novel he's writing is located here in Montreal and in New Orleans. It's planned to be out in print soon and an ebook in late November. Welcome, Michael. Yes. Thank you. So we're going to get started here. We've got a few questions to get things going, and of course, after we do our little bit, we have time for Q&A, and of course, after the event, we're pleased to talk to you and meet you outside in the hallway. So our first question is about origins. Where did all this begin? How do you come up with the ideas? What's the genesis? What's the inspiration? What drove you to write mysteries? And we'll start with Del.
Oh dear. How much time do I have?
Well, we'll cut you off, don't worry.
Sorry. Thank you, Russell. Interestingly enough, I'm doing a presentation next week at the Town of Mount Royal Library on my storytelling journey from entrepreneur to authorpreneur. So you can come there if you want to see me next week if you're not busy watching the elections, which are more of a horror story than anything that's happening.
Yes, they are.
More than anything that's happening today on Halloween. However, and we didn't invite a horror story writer for today's event, but my storytelling journey started, I didn't really think about it until after the fact, but I think I've always been a storyteller. I enjoy telling jokes, retelling jokes, improving on the joke I heard from somebody else. And I did well in English in high school. I went to journalism class thinking that might be the place to get started as a writer. However, in grade 11 in Kimberley, British Columbia, southeastern British Columbia, the teacher, whose name Mr. Buckle, I still remember because I hated him ever since, he said, "Chatterson, get out of here. This is a vocational course and you're in the university program." I've had a lot of journalists object to that because they didn't see it as a vocational studies. But that's when I went on to university, became an engineer, did an MBA at McGill, and didn't get back to writing fiction until about 50 years later. But I did do a lot of storytelling. Throughout my career, I've used it as a way of telling stories, giving the message, this is what I learned, working with clients. Here's the problem. Let me tell you about the time this guy did that, and it worked or didn't work. So when I wrote 2 business books, I included what I called real life stories. And after those were published in 2014, and at the end, I thought this would be a lot more fun for me as the writer and for the reader if I would take those same stories and put them into crime fiction. So that's what led me to the Dale Hunter series about an entrepreneur in the Montreal computer business in the 1980s, fighting crime and corruption from the mafia and gangsters around the world. It's not my true story. It's not my confessions. It's mostly fiction.
Good. All right, thanks, Del. Same question to you, Michael. How'd you get started?
That's a good question. I'm Irish, so I'm an I'm a storyteller from way back. Our family, we used to give each other gifts for New Year's, and it had to be a book. So I don't read books, I devour books. So I'm an avid reader. So I started with that. My career has been an international consultant, and I was an arbitrator. So I kept on writing, legal texts and things like that. So I was reading a book once from a top writer. I said, this is not that great. I can do better than that. If I had been a cartoon, a little light would have. So I've been writing for about 16 years, and I've been publishing for about 10. So I went to different schools on the net and things like that. My problem is that all my education has been in French. So one of my editors told me that I was very, very creative. Unfortunately, he was talking about my syntax and my... so anyhow, I started writing crime mystery because that's what I like to read, one of the things I like to read. But the genre has changed a lot today. So we used to have in a little box, it used to be like, what type of crime, cozies, this, that, little boxes. Doesn't exist anymore. I just reviewed a book for somebody, A Cat's Nose for Murder. It's set in a fictitious, magical city, and a cat and somebody else solves the mystery. So that's not traditional mysteries. The genre has opened a lot. So where do I find inspiration for stories? Well, I could tell you that there's a secret store in New York, 5th Avenue and 58th Street, just next to the fortune teller, between that and Liberty Bagels, that sells inspirations and stories and things like that, but it's not true. It's not true. The fact that many fiction writers have an overdeveloped what-if gene in their DNA. So I see an accident. First thing I think of is, I hope nobody's seriously injured. My second question is, what if? What if the person who died in this accident, the authorities find out he was dead 4 years ago? Well, maybe he was a spy and he came back to do some dastardly deeds. Maybe it's a time traveler. So I'm into fiction, the murder, mystery. So what if? I'm putting gas in my car and I look, there's a van coming up. What if the two people get out of the van, kidnap this guy and put him in the truck and run away with him? What if? So that's where you find I pass on the street and the little baby does something. What if? So that's where I find my inspiration. What if? I got a what if gene that's blown up. So what if?
Thanks, Michael. That's good. And I guess I have to answer my own question. So yes, I used to travel a lot for business in my prior careers, and I was always on the lookout for a nice, easy to read, fun action book at the airport bookstore. And all of the ones that I could find were all about the US or the UK or something. And it's like, oh, the president's threatened. I don't care, it's not my problem. What about something about Canada? And I could not find anything. So I decided to write one myself. It's an all-Canadian, pan-Canadian action thriller. It mentions Timbits. I got a star review for that. So what I was looking for in terms of a story, I tried many times and failed. I really wanted to do this. I didn't know how to do it, and then one day I said, I have to do it. And the story I started with, the what if, as Michael says, is what happened. I researched the FLQ and the October crisis, 1969 to 1970. I was very small. I don't remember much except all the cool stuff. What happens if that came back, but this time in Alberta? So that's the genesis. And then I did a lot of research, met lots of people, lots of traveling, and it was a very good process. So my motivation is I wanted to write a book that I would read myself when I'm traveling. Good. All right, so let's give a sample. We each are going to give a sample of the writing. You can judge for yourself if it's interesting, and if you like it, then we have copies for sale, and if not, you can keep on going. All right, so maybe we can start with Michael this time. Okay. Yeah, and then we'll go for Del. So just a short extract, something that would capture the reader's attention.
Yep. Very good morning, people. Welcome to another quasi-summer day in Montreal. This is a a reprint of the second novel in the series. We're up to 9 now. The second novel explodes and gives us more insight into the, getting an eye over there. I think I'm moving the microphone too much. So it's bad publicity for the city when the businesswoman of the year is murdered execution style. City projects and political dreams die with her. Officials want the case solved fast. Reinstated after a suspension, Lieutenant Baudry is on the edge of rebellion. It won't take much for him to go rogue. To make things worse, he's now ordered to work with a recruit. He always works alone. RCMP and CIA operatives are tagging along in the shadows as the case spirals into international proportions, implicating crooked financiers, local politicians, mercenary, and hitmen. So I went a little bit Ian Fleming on this. So this is a bit James Bond type book, but it's a fun read. We're talking about crooked financiers and politicians. I think that's pretty well the news today anyhow. So that's it for that.
You want to read it next?
No, I'll let them read it.
Yeah, you did insist, so I'm going to do as I'm told. A question for you, though, first. Everybody talks about the first page being so important. My question for you is, how many pages do you read in a book that you've heard about before you decide you don't want to read it? Or if you start, you always finish it? You do? You can't stop?
100 pages.
100
Wow,
pages?
That's pretty dedicated.
Okay, so it's
That's how
the
far
first,
it's
as we've been told in our writing courses or whatever writers we've read about, the first page is important to pull you into the book, and the last page is important to get you to read the next book. So that's kind of the strategy, particularly in a series, as Michael described. I have a series of 5 books. Under the Hat is one that is being published in December. The first 3 are about the entrepreneur in the 1980s. And then we carry on to the 1990s. The 4th book, called Bad Boys in Boston, is in 2019. So the pre-COVID era. I'm not willing to get into the COVID set yet. And the next one is back in the 1990s. This one is the 3rd novel in the series, called Merger Maniac, about Dale Hunter is trying to survive against competitive threats in the rapidly evolving computer business of the 1980s. That continues to be the theme in the book, Crash Landing. Hunter is looking for merger or acquisition partners when he's suddenly approached by the aggressive and violent Montreal Mafia to join their money laundering schemes and use dirty money for his plans. Their very persuasive offers just have to be refused. The book is called Merger Maniac, and the subtitle is Some Offers Have to Be Refused. So I'm going to read you the first chapter, or the first page, or 2, 3 maybe, 2 pages, that my editor said was a good opening. So that got me enthusiastic about this book. I hope it gets you enthusiastic about all the books, which are here. The story starts with the mafia next door, sort of chapter 1. The explosion shook the neighborhood. Nobody expected to be jolted out of bed or up from the breakfast table by a loud boom that rattled the windows, followed by the clatter of falling debris at 6:30 in the morning. Even more startling was the sight of a burning BMW in Dale Hunter's driveway. It leaned to the driver's side on the blown front tire, and black smoke billowed out of the shattered windshield as flames flickered from the front seats and dashboard. The hood lay crumpled on the neighbor's lawn in the bright summer sunshine. This should not be happening in the quiet West Island suburb of Montreal, far from the East End neighborhoods where the mafia families regularly killed each other and blew up vehicles. Violence rarely visited the tranquil residential streets of the West Island. Dale Hunter rushed out of the front door of his house with a small red canister fire extinguisher and started spraying foam through the broken driver's side window. His wife, Susan, stood in the doorway and held back their 2 wide-eyed children, Sean and Kira. Kira was crying, "Oh, Mummy, what happened to Daddy's car?" The blast brought the neighbors to their windows to peer at the scene and held them there as the sound of approaching sirens came closer. An elderly gentleman down the street let the curtain fall back over the front living room windows and mumbled to his wife. I was wondering about that young man. Seemed to be doing awfully well, but now it appears he's in some trouble with the mafia. Lucky it was only his car and he wasn't in it. The next morning, Dale Hunter came out the front door to look at the burnt-out mess of his BMW coupe in the driveway. The police had taken a long time to investigate the cause of the explosion and fire. They were coming back today to complete their reports and allow Dale to have the damaged car removed. Dale picked up the Montreal Gazette from his newspaper from his doorstep, dated Wednesday, June 21st, 1989. He ignored the front page headline about President Bush and Prime Minister Mulroney meeting for more talks on extension of the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement to include Mexico. He saw immediately the front page sidebar titled, "Mafia Violence Hits the West Island Suburbs," with a short paragraph above a small photo of the burned-out BMW in his driveway and a reference to the full article on page 3. He quickly opened the paper to page 3, where he found a large photo and a 3-column story under the name of Robert Martinelli, crime reporter. Dale scanned the article and saw that the police were suspicious of mafia involvement, but they had no evidence to prove any mafia connection to the owner of the vehicle. Some of the neighbors had been interviewed. No names or addresses were provided, but the neighbors were both suspicious and concerned. They would all be reading the same article closely this morning for more details. Dale looked up the street and wondered how soon he would have to explain what was really going on and how he would now have to change his plans if he wanted to keep his family safe.
Nice. All right, thanks, Dale. Thanks. Tough act to follow. Geez, okay. Well, I think I'll start all at the start as well. So, and then I'll read the synopsis at the book cover at the end here, just to give you an idea of what the writing's like and see if you like it. Target their bridge. Claire gave the order. She could feel the gaze of her crew. Would she deliberately kill? She'd been captain for barely 2 months. Too junior, not tested, and a woman. Only 2 minutes earlier, she had watched endless waves pound a small fishing boat, the spray and incessant snow rendering it invisible at times, despite the blazing cone of light from the helicopter above. Off the coast of Nova Scotia, the winter nor'easter that had paralyzed New England with 2 feet of powder retained enough of its fury to imperil any ocean vessel. A kilometer away, the CH-149 Cormorant, shaking violently a few wave heights above a turbulent ocean, was trying to keep its searchlight fixed on the ship that bucked between mountains of water. "It's the MV Atlantic Mariner, out of Boston," the pilot said over the radio. Claire squeezed the microphone dangling from the ceiling. "Captain O'Brien, do you see anyone on board?" A moment of white noise, and then, "There must be, we'll advise." The sailor manning the radio on the bridge of the coastal patrol vessel HMCS Kingston, that's Petty Officer 2nd Class Sullivan, turned to Claire. "Maritime Command said the vessel never acknowledged radio contact, ma'am. They never asked for any help." That was Lieutenant Wiseman, executive officer and second in command, as he brushed past in the tight space. Claire sat in the captain's chair. "Doesn't matter, X, something's not right," Claire thought. "There's no transponder signal," Sullivan added. "We're not going anywhere. It's my first rescue." Wiseman nodded. "And it looks like a lobster boat anyway. Isn't lobster season here in the spring?" "Agreed," Claire leaned forward and thought. "There's something very weird about this. We'll keep trying." Then O'Brien's voice crackled on the radio again. "No one in sight. Do you want us to continue?" Claire raised her binoculars. "Yes." Flicked some loose strands of hair out of the way and continued looking at the tiny shaft of light blinking between shifting mounds of black water. "My first chance to do something good." She grabbed the mic again and squeezed the button. "O'Brien, this is the Kingston. Hold position. Continue search. Advise when low on fuel." Acknowledged. A moment later, the pilot's voice returned with a new edge. "There's someone down there." Claire saw it too. A single dark figure emerged from the bridge of the helpless vessel. The helo narrowed the spotlight until the person stood like an actor alone on a stage. The man, he walked like a man even at this distance, took a few steps and held what appeared to be a short pole. Wiseman turned to her. "Vessel at 2 degrees starboard, ma'am, range 1 kilometer. A change in the familiar background rustle told her that their 6-person bridge crew had now moved into a higher state of readiness. She saw the fishing boat suddenly spring to life with running lights bright. The boat swung towards the Kingston, appearing as a small supernova against the black of the frothing sea. This was not a normal reaction. "X, report," she said. Wiseman watched the radar display. "Target approaching, 10 knots, accelerating." Don't they want to be rescued, she thought. "Is it a collision course?" Wiseman turned again. "Roger, ma'am." Was the boat deliberately trying to collide with the Kingston? This is supposed to be a rescue mission. She remembered what her instructor had said. When in doubt, sound action station, she ordered. A perceptible pause told her they were wondering if she was serious. Then the ex acknowledged her command. Most of the crew was older than her 31 years, and she wasn't sure how they would react to a new and untested officer in what soon might become a crisis. The looping klaxon blared on the bridge and throughout the ship. Ship to ship, she ordered Sullivan. Ready, ma'am. She gripped the mic. Atlantic Mariner, this is the captain of the Kingston. We're here to assist you. Please acknowledge. Only static. She didn't have much discretion as the captain of a coastal patrol vessel. She needed permission from her superiors back in Halifax to use the cannon that could annihilate the boat in one shot. With a long chain of command that went up to the Minister of Defense, she was unlikely to get that permission within a day. Until then, she could use the 50 caliber machine gun mounted to the starboard side of the ship. She had a single gun to defend the ship. Any threat situation had to meet 3 criteria she had learned. First, there was intent. The boat hadn't threatened anybody. It seemed to ignore the helicopter above. Let's see if that ship is deliberately trying to ram us. Steer 135, she ordered, and the helmsman repeated her command and swung the wheel. She grabbed onto the overhead handle as the ship veered dramatically to the right, still pitched by wave after wave. She watched the fishing boat's reaction. Midships, she ordered, and the light from the Atlantic Mariner dimmed for a moment, then quickly brightened again. Target is following our move, ma'am. So that's intent, Claire thought. Or do they just want to be rescued? Why don't they acknowledge our hail or the helicopter hovering above them? Her indecision felt familiar. Should she pursue a law degree and satisfy her parents' ambitions, or join the Navy? Simple, keep it simple. Stick with the criteria, she told herself. The second one was proximity. Distance, she called. 600 meters, closing at 30 knots, said the navigator. On a quick mental calculation, the boat would penetrate her ship's 300-meter safety perimeter in less than 20 seconds. Then she would have to consider it a mortal threat. Seconds to decide. O'Brien back on the radio. There's something else, Kingston. She watched the man in the pole shift until it pointed directly at the copter. RPG, RPG. O'Brien's voice sounded more angry than scared, and a flash from the ship ahead. The rocket-propelled grenade ripped past the chopper as it banked sharply to the right, dipped, and accelerated away. Confirm RPG, Claire said into the mic, suddenly oblivious to the klaxon. Captain O'Brien answered in short bursts over the radio. RPG, confirm, taking, evasive action. As she could see the helicopter veer away. Did they just fire at the helo? Said Claire to no one in particular. Wiseman back on the tactical screen. Recommend we do the same. She hopped back into their captain's chair and glowered. The Atlantic Mariner now satisfied the third criterion, capability. They had a weapon that was a threat to the ship and the crew. One RPG could do serious damage to the bridge or the engines or blast a hole below the waterline, potentially sinking the ship. Close up M2, she ordered. It was the only weapon she could command in the time that she had. You couldn't stop the boat, but you could stop the crew. Target their bridge now. So that's the start of the book. Oh, thanks. Oh, sorry.
I can't buck the trend, so I may as well.
Okay, I want to read the pitch.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so here's the back cover of the book. The career of Claire Marcoux, who you've just met. A young naval officer threatens to come crashing down after she orders a ship under her command to return fire on a boat that she was supposed to rescue. The quiet life of Daniel Ritter, a new professor in a new town, is turned upside down when the celebrity entrepreneur he was unexpectedly invited to meet is found murdered. Oh, there's your mystery. Thrown together by chance, Claire and Daniel discover they are involved in the same fight against an unknown enemy, a foe with a plot that endangers the lives of many and the very existence of the country they both cherish. So that's the pitch. All right, Michael, you want to do a reading, and then we'll go to the next question.
Can't bug the trend, so.
Okay,
yes.
all
right. My hero is a homicide detective. So if there's no body, he doesn't have a job. So obviously, there's a body in the chapter 1 or chapter 2. That's as far as it goes. So this is a bit different, this one. In the mood to do nothing today, I was enjoying the fresh April breeze and that first sip of morning coffee. From the weathered rocking chair on my third floor balcony, I could look 2 blocks south and see the cobblestone lanes of old Montreal. I could also see my boss driving up. I scratched my 3-day beard. Now what? The captain parked in front of my house, bounded out of his car, and marched up the steps. I hadn't spoken to him since the day some 6 months ago when he kicked me out of his office. In a hostage situation gone wrong, I had shot some bad guys. I had been a bit fast on the trigger, and my excessive enthusiasm in ending hostage situation earned me an indefinite suspension. When Internal Affairs asked me why I had shot 2 bank robbers and wounded a third, I told them I was rusty because I hadn't been to the range recently. Get a snarky sense of humor. They hadn't appreciated my humor and gave me the choice of counseling or the suspension. As the doorbell rang, I walked back to the hallway and hit the intercom. There's nobody home but the cat. Go tell Robert I need to talk to him now. Reluctantly, I buzzed the door open. Come on up. Typical of Montreal's bilingual heritage, Jean O'Neill, my boss, had a French-Canadian first name and an Irish surname. As always, in keeping by the book management style, he was impeccably turned out. A slim 6'6", he stood straight as a pool shark's queue, his mustache trimmed and every bristle of his salt and pepper brush cut in precise formation. But for the crooked nose and the furrows on each side of his mouth, he could have been moderately handsome. We had worked together for the past 8 years, but my loose interpretation of the rule book often put us at odds. Jean would have made a good politician. It wasn't easy to get a solid yes or a final no out of him, and his instructions were often gray. It left me with enough wiggle room to get myself in trouble. We'll just switch to something else here. So I asked, is my suspension lifted or not? He stood up, fished a wallet-sized leather case out of his raincoat and handed me my badge. Robert, your vacation is fini. I'm giving you a new partner. You know I work alone. I can't have you running loose again. You have to learn to work in a team. My niece, Patricia, just transferred from fraud to homicide. She needs a mentor. Do I look like a babysitter? She's far from a baby, and you have the street smarts to keep her out of trouble. More importantly, she's strong-willed with enough sense of humor to put up with you. I looked over the rim of my cup and slurped my coffee. Your office at 9 tomorrow? I said. Wrong. You were back on the job 20 minutes ago. There's a dead woman folded into the trunk of a BMW in the old port parking lot, 4 blocks from here. You've got 15 minutes to shave and make yourself presentable.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Michael. Oh, boy. 2 stories and 2 troubled BMWs. Oh, wow.
It's not my car, right?
That's not your car. All right, so I got a hint of each of our stories. So second question, why mysteries? Del, why are you writing mysteries?
That's a good question, because I'm not sure I'm writing murder mysteries.
Okay.
But the last one, actually, there is a mystery as to whether it's a suicide or a murder. So I think that one qualifies. But I would say I started with stories of crime and corruption, not necessarily murder, but of course it's not very interesting. My first editor insisted that I call them a thriller series. So I had to find a way to make it thrilling. Yep. And I still get complaints there isn't enough violence or sex. And I haven't changed that, actually. You may be disappointed. But to make it thrilling, you have to have the stakes. You have to raise the stakes where either somebody's already dead or going to be dead if he doesn't do the right thing. So there is threats of murder, kidnapping, and it just kind of makes because the business stories are kind of boring, which I tell, and I insert lessons for entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs that make it boring. So, and I'm constantly going through the process with the editor of take that out, that's boring, and oh, that's interesting, I didn't know you could do that. And I have entrepreneurs who read it and say, hey, I enjoyed that. Or I have people who've never been an entrepreneur and always wondered about it and said, my God, that poor guy has a lot going on he has to worry about. And so it's a matter of making it, I would call it more not a true crime story, but more of an adventure. There's murder, mystery, thriller, all those elements and it's kind of what I modeled a little bit off after John Grisham. And I did the research. It's a business crime business thriller doesn't exist. And I was told, don't call it business fiction. Nobody will read that. So I mean, it's stories about an entrepreneur, and that's pretty obvious fairly soon, but it has to be more interesting than that. So, when I looked up business fiction, what do you think is the #1 best-selling business fiction ever written? Any book come to mind? You'd never read it? The one that came up on a Google search, which is where everybody does the research, is The Firm by John Grisham.
Yeah, Grisham. Okay.
Which interestingly is, I would have thought it was legal fiction, because he created the genre of legal fiction. And of course, it's been very successful, although now, talking about genre, if you go to an agent, they don't want anything. We've had enough legal fiction, we've had enough spy stories. Political thrillers, all of that's out of fashion. So it's kind of a constant, what do readers want? Now it's all domestic thrillers. You know, the killer is in the family, he's the next door neighbor. That's very popular. But I don't like to write that stuff. Life is scary enough.
Yep. All right, thanks, Del. How about you, Michael? Yours is a police procedural.
Procedural or a hard-boiled detectives. I write that because that's one of my favorite reading things. You know, Mickey Spillane, Robert Parker, Robert Craig, John D. MacDonald, the old-fashioned, is that telling my age there, but old-fashioned. Del is right, the scenery is changing. They used to categorize us and put us in a box and say, okay, you're writing cozies and this and that, you know. The cozy mysteries are like the butler did it with a candlestick. It happens in an enclosed, you know, a castle or a house or something. It's yes, and tea drinking. Yes. I was in Concord, New Hampshire, at Books A Million, and there was a whole row of Louise Penny novels. So that's still in. She's very popular. She had more dedicated space than most of the other writers. It works for her. Mind you, I'm not sure I would visit Three Pines if it existed. I think she's killed off half the population in that little
It's like
town.
nobody left, right? There's nobody left.
Nobody left. So there's Punisher stories now. The Punisher, the Equalizer, Hard Target. Trends are changing. In fact, they're making movies and series now from the comics that I used to read when I was young. Okay, much younger. CIA, government conspiracy stories. So the trends are opening up. Like Del says, we don't want this, we don't want that. So we're writing something in between. I'm writing stuff in Montreal because I know Montreal. And in one of my books, he says he's always in a rush to get to the crime scene, obviously, in Montreal. So he's driving down the Carry at arthritic turtle speed. So he's not too happy about it. He says from the International Space Station, you can see the Great Wall of China and the glow of the orange cones of Montreal. So I'm sneaking. So that's about it. So I set my books in. It's all about murder, but it's in different settings. I've got one of them in a murdered. It's I call it homophobic in our gay village. I got another one that talks about child pornography, bank robbery. There's always a murder, but there's a theme behind it, a current theme. In one of my books, a policewoman gets shot, and there's a big do about it, and the funeral. That happened for real, but it was on Metropolitan Boulevard years ago. So I put real stuff into the book to, enlighten it. So, and the cat is always up to mischief. So if you own a cat, it can't be all bad, although he has a fast trigger. So that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Michael. And I guess for me too, I also I don't write mysteries, I write the thrillers. I want a lot of speed, lots of action, that kind of stuff. There is some reflection, but I really wanted thank you. But I grew up on mysteries. I really like the Scandic noir. I grew up reading all of the Henning Mankell. And then when I lived in Sweden, all my friends were reading Stieg Larsson. So that when he came out, and I couldn't read in Swedish, I had to wait. But they were really great books. When I was younger, I really liked the Robert Ludlum stuff. He really knew how to spin a story. It's like, there's no way this happened, but I believe it anyways. Like, how does he do that? So I tried to study his techniques as well. More recently, I guess it's, Tom Clancy kind of action thrillers, techno thriller. We're not really into that so much now, but Mark Greaney so he's a more recent author, American. It's like high-tech, techno thriller, but again, it's all about America. It's like, I don't care. So what can I do about Canada? So the only one I could figure out that was even remotely close as a Canadian author was Richard Romer. I don't know if you remember him. He was an author in the 1970s, and he wrote a series called Exoneration, where the US was proposing to annex Canada for its oil. And I thought, what? But it was pretty interesting. It was okay. It's like, so that's the closest I got. So that's why I want to read. I want to write what I like to read, so it's fun. So we have one more. Oh,
Yeah, just to follow on that point, though, it's is it on? Can you hear me now? Thank you. Yeah, it's because part of it is the model of we write based on the models of writers that we enjoyed, and for me it was. I have read Louise Penny, and I don't think she would call herself a cozy mystery writer, but it's deeper than that now, and she's developed the characters a lot. But for me, I looked up, again, I insisted it was stay Canadian, and my editor said, okay, Montreal is exotic enough. So you can leave it in Montreal. But you've had the experience that you got to take Canada out of it, or you'll never sell them in the US. So that's okay, I can live with that. But the other one was, Kathy Reichs was the model for me because she wrote, when she was in Canada, the first Déjà Dead, which was a demonstration of bilingualism in the book. She did a great job of how Montrealers speak. On commence en français, puis on continue en anglais. That's typical of Montreal. And she managed to put that into the book so that I had I tried to model on her, and I had one American reader say, thank you for doing the translation, because I don't understand any of the French. But I had great difficulty remembering the names, because the names in French, you just give them the name, and they don't remember because it doesn't stick as easily as Joe Smith. And the other one is Ian Hamilton, who wrote, again, he has a series of novels about Amy Lee, I think. Lee, yeah. Amy Lee. And Amy Lee, she's interesting. Check this for a character that he invented. She's a Chinese-Canadian lesbian forensic accountant.
And martial arts expert in this obscure martial art.
Yeah, she's also, so she runs around the world kicking ass and collecting money from bad guys. Yep. and he's had a very successful series. But it's, again, she's based in Toronto, and he was back and forth to China. He had a lot of personal experience in China, so that makes the story very interesting. So that the question I would have is, we've talked about the plot and what the genre is, but how important are characters in your development and writing process?
Yeah, good. We've got 4 minutes left, I guess. So for a character, yeah, a character is like everything, right? You got to put all your hopes and dreams and idiosyncrasies, and yep. So my characters have plenty of those. So I have a female lead who you've just met briefly, and then I have a male lead too, and lots of shenanigans happen. So yeah, so all those characteristics that you really want to shine, you put in your characters, and it takes a long time. It took me 5 years to write the book, research and rewrites and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because the advice I've gotten from other writers that are successful is that the readers will never remember the plot, the twist. I mean, they're entertained as they're reading it, but when it's over, what sticks with them is that character. Man, that scared the hell out of me, or I really love this guy. And what I found is that they loved the wrong guy from the first book. Mm-hmm. I invented a second character, Dale Hunter. He's boring. So.
Yeah, but he's going to have a new series, right?
Yeah. No, I'm not doing a spinoff.
Okay.
Dale Hunter gets to narrate now, so he's kind of like the Dr. Watson talking about Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, how about you, Michael? Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah, the character has to be special. Like you can see my reading, he's a bit weird. He's a bit special with a fast trigger. It took me about 2 years to sort of dribble around writing a book. I rewrote it 4 times. But what I did is I created a CV, what he likes, what he likes to eat, what he does this, and I created a CV for every one of the characters. He's got friends on the other side of the badge, so from mafia people that he knew and things like that. So even his girlfriend, how she eats, is she on a diet? What is she? So once I have all the CVs down, then when I start writing a novel, normally I know the beginning, it's a murder on this, and I know the ending. It's the swamp in the middle that gets me all the time. So once you have the CVs, you know how they're going to answer. So in my mind, anyhow, when the reader's mind, the reader can see them completely different. And I've realized that with talking to some of my fans. I see the guy as this size with this color hair, and they see him different. Same thing but to be able to write it, you have to have the character in your mind. You have to know what he likes, what he doesn't like, how he speaks. I have somebody who's a lab technician. He's got voice problems. He stutters a bit. So I got to write him in. And he stutters because he's got background. So it's very important. Same thing for research. Like Del is a businessman, so he knows a lot of stuff. But you got to do research. I used to do tons of research and found out I was doing 20% of the research I did. So now I just write. I get to somewhere, whoops, Google it, spend an hour or two researching, writing notes, and I'll take part of that. So you learn, it's a learning process. It's a skill, writing is a skill that I will probably never be 100% at. So it's a challenge, which I'm keeping up.
It never ends.
So maybe just a few final, you want to say something?
Well, I was going to ask though, it sounds like you create a cast of characters before you start a story. Because I do the reverse. I have a story in mind and I invent characters as I need them and fill in the blanks when the reader needs to know. Why is he doing that? Where did he come from? Who killed his father? I don't know.
Good. All right. Thanks, Del. Well, I guess our time is up, Lynn. So 3.
Well,
1:45.
you did a great job. Thank you very much. Now it's time for Q&A. So we have 10 minutes for the audience to ask questions. I invite the people in the room to put your hand up if you'd like to ask something, and I'll bring you the mic so the Zoom audience will hear. And I'll ask Jason, our IT guy, to show any questions in the Zoom chat.
Oh, we do.
Okay, so the question is,
Hard to hear me. Oh, I thought it was speaking up.
yeah,
Okay.
I actually don't see a
We don't
question.
see any questions there.
Okay,
no,
but
just the
I have a question while you're all thinking. Audiobooks. I'm wondering if any of your work is in audiobook format. I'll quickly say that Anne Lambert's 3 crime novels set in the Montreal-Area are all in audiobook format and in the Outwater Library collection. Anne herself, who's of course had a career in theater, does a brilliant job of narration. She is perfectly bilingual, and she does a terrific job of capturing the Francophone and the Anglophone characters. So I highly recommend Anne's novels in audiobook format. Now, a question. Margaret, I'm coming to you with the mic.
I'm just wondering, on average, do you start with the ending of the story? Like, do you know how it's going to end and then work backwards to the beginning? Or would it be the other way around? Or I guess it would depend with the book.
Sure. I'm going to guess we have 3 answers here. So my answer is actually very similar to Michael. So I know the starting point, I knew the first scene, and I know the last sentence, and that's it. But when I first started, I approached it as an engineer would, because that's my training as an engineer. So I had my whole basement wall, and one wall was completely filled with Post-it notes, all sequenced, all the things that are going to happen. And it lasted a couple of weeks, and I threw them all out because my characters told me what's really going to happen. And it was, so that's very strange. So yeah, I knew the last line, and the last line is still in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I start with a story, and whether it's a murder or a kidnapping or who's going to get murdered, and I maybe have a general story outline, but I kind of work it out as I go, because one thing leads to another, and the first suspect that everybody could guess, like in this the current book, Crash Landing, there's a suicide, which is suspected to be a murderer, and he's in the middle of a bankruptcy, and he's got a lot of creditors after him, and the mafia after him, and he's in the middle of a divorce, so it's obvious his wife killed him. Except it's too obvious, so it couldn't possibly be his wife. So then I have to decide all the way through the book, is she still a suspect or not? And who should it be? So I flipped it to somebody else, but then I had to sort of go through the process of how do we reveal that it's that person and tease people with clues that lead elsewhere or to that person. I don't want to tell you too much, so you have to buy the book to get the whole story.
Yeah, like I said, I know the beginning and the end. It's a swamp, and the alligators in the swamp in the middle that get me. But that's what takes time. But you're right, it depends on the author, but normally we know what the book is going to be about. And normally my titles are repeated in the book. Somebody says that in the book. So you have to find out where. And you win a book.
It's a quiz question.
Now I'm looking for more hands. We have time for another question. I'm coming to you with the mic, excuse me.
Speak loudly now. Especially for the novels written, or the mysteries written set in Montreal, has there been any attempt to translate them into French and sell the French version of the book?
Michael, you want to start?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me that. For Crime Writers of Canada, I opened my big trap and I told them, I said, Crime Writers of Canada, and we rarely have French books in a contest. We have a lot of English books, we rarely. So they said, well, you're in charge. So I had 12 French books to read. And
You didn't select your own book?
No, I've got a French lady who writes science fiction in Quebec, and her French writing is so perfect that she disgusted me from me writing a French book. Besides, you cannot translate a book as far as I'm concerned. You have to rewrite it. I mean, it's a horse of a different color. What's the equivalent in French? Un autre paire de manche. I mean, it has nothing to do with it. You can't translate it. It's a different mindset. So it's hard to, you'd have to rewrite the book in French and this and that. I'm also thinking of doing audiobooks, but my French has an accent, English accent. My English has a French accent, and my Italian sounds like Spanish. So and everything is said with an Irish lilt. I'm after telling you. So I can't win.
Maybe not.
I got to find somebody that once I have 10 books, we'll do the whole series in French and in audio.
Great. How about you, Del? French translation?
Yeah, I have pitched another author to help me have a publisher do the translations, and Audible is the same, but if you're doing your own publishing, it's an added cost. But readers, I don't know if you can still call them readers, listeners want to have an Audible version. So yeah, it's becoming more and more popular. I think it's growing faster than ebooks, even Audible.
Yeah.
Because
mine,
people are multitasking, so they find it's easy to be doing something else, cooking or carpentry work while they're listening to a book.
True. I like it. And my publisher said, yeah, we'll do it. Wait till you get 3 books out, then we'll talk.